Romania, bear terror. Tourist mauled by enraged bear after feeding it through car window in Romania's bear pass. A terrifying wildlife attack unfolded in Romania's Carpathian Mountains when a tourist was violently mauled by a mother bear after stopping to feed the animal and its cub from his car. Now let's go beyond the surface and reveal every layer of this story on our AI podcast.
If you throw a sandwich out of your car window to a wild bear, you probably think you're being generous.
Right, like you're having this magical Disney-style connection with nature.
Exactly. You might even feel good about it. But to a mother bear, you haven't offered a snack. You've basically just declared war.
Yeah, it's a completely different language you're speaking to them.
It really is. So welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are opening up a stack of, frankly, deeply alarming recent reports about wild bear attacks.
And these reports really highlight the blurring lines between human spaces and wildlife. It's getting dangerous.
It is. And the core mission of this deep dive today is to look at human psychology just as much as animal behavior.
Because that psychology is usually what starts the whole chain reaction.
100%. And I want to say right up front, even if you live in the center of a major metropolis, you never plan to set foot in bear country, this is still for you.
Yeah, it's universally applicable.
Right, because this is fundamentally about the false sense of security we all carry when we interact with the raw, unpredictable power of nature.
And the sources we are analyzing today paint a really vivid, kind of terrifying picture of what ecologists are starting to call an inward collapsing ecosystem.
Wow, inward collapsing. That sounds intense.
It is. We're going to look at two starkly contrasting incidents that happened just days apart.
Okay.
In one scenario, we'll examine the mechanics of what happens when a human forces their way into a wild bear's habitat, basically treating a mountain pass like a roadside petting zoo.
Ugh, yeah, the recipe for disaster.
Exactly. And in the other, we'll dissect the biology and really the sensory chaos of a terrifying event where a bear crashed into a heavily industrialized human zone.
Which completely shatters the illusion that our concrete and steel structures keep the wild out.
Precisely.
So to start, think about the last time you drove through a scenic natural area, maybe a national park or a wildlife reserve. It is incredibly easy to fall into this, well, I call it our safari theme park mentality.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah. We sit in our climate-controlled vehicles looking through a windshield, and our brains start to process the landscape like it is a television screen.
We feel totally detached from it.
Completely detached. We subconsciously assume that the thin pane of glass rolled up in our car door acts like some kind of magical, impenetrable force field against apex predators.
Right, and that psychological detachment is the crucial starting point for the first incident in our source material.
Yeah, let's dive into that one.
So this takes place in the Carpathian Mountains of Romania near the famous Vădraru Dam.
Beautiful area, but very busy.
Extremely. It's a stunning, highly trafficked route that also happens to intersect with a notorious natural wildlife corridor.
Which the locals actually call a bear pass, right?
Exactly. It's prime bear habitat.
Okay, so here's what happens. A Bulgarian tourist, a 46-year-old man named Georgi Bizev, was driving through this exact pass.
Just a normal scenic drive.
Right. And he spots a mother bear accompanied by her cub, just lingering near the roadside.
This is already a red flag, mother and cub.
Huge red flag. But instead of keeping his windows rolled up and, just moving along, Bizev stops his vehicle.
Of course.
He starts tossing food scraps out of the car toward the bears while trying to film and take photos from inside his vehicle.
The classic tourist mistake.
It is. And within seconds, this escalates into a horrific attack. The mother bear lunges at the car, smashes through the window.
Just straight through the glass.
Straight through. She bites his left arm and actively tries to drag him out of the vehicle.
It's terrifying. And we have to pause here and look at the behavioral biology driving this because it's not what people think.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this because why do we do this?
Well, to understand why this went so wrong, we have to strip away the human narrative and look at the environment entirely through the mother bear's perception.
Okay, put ourselves in her paws, so to speak.
Exactly. The Romanian authorities stated unequivocally that this bear was not hunting.
Oh, really? She wasn't trying to eat him?
No, not at all. She was exhibiting defensive aggression. When a tourist throws food, they think, oh, I'm pacifying the animal to get a better photo.
Like giving a dog a treat.
Right. But to a mother bear, proximity is the ultimate trigger.
Proximity to the cub, you mean?
Yes. By throwing food and lingering there, Bizev was maintaining a physical closeness to her cub that crossed an invisible biological threshold.
Okay, I hear you on the defensive instinct, I really do. But I have to push back a little on the mechanics of the attack itself.
Sure, what do you mean?
Well, why a car? I mean, a bear is an incredibly intelligent animal, right?
Very intelligent.
It knows a car is made of hard metal. It smells the gasoline, the rubber, the exhaust. Why wouldn't a wild animal's first instinct be to, retreat from a loud, unnatural machine rather than launching a physical assault against it?
That's a great question, and it comes down to how habituation completely overrides natural caution.
Habituation. So getting used to us.
Exactly. In a pristine wilderness, a bear would likely flee from the smell and sound of a combustion engine. It's alien to them.
Right, it's scary.
But in a heavily trafficked bear pass, where tourists have been tossing food out of windows for years, the car is no longer categorized as an unnatural threat.
Oh, wow.
It's categorized as a food dispenser.
It's a giant metal vending machine.
Precisely. However, the moment the mother bear perceived a threat to her cub, and Bizev actually noted in his interview that he saw her ears prick up right before she jumped.
Oh, that tiny warning sign.
Yeah. Her maternal defense mechanism instantly overrode her habituation to the car.
So the car wasn't a food dispenser anymore.
Right. At that moment, the car ceased to be a machine. It was simply a fragile shell holding the thread.
That is wild.
And the sheer mechanical force required to crush a car window and pull a grown man out, it's a testament to the fact that, to an enraged adult bear, our human engineering is barely a deterrent.
It's like tissue paper to them. And, the witness footage in Bizjev's own accounts highlight the sheer panic of that realization.
I can't even imagine.
He's sitting there desperately trying to shield his face and neck from its jaws, and he's suffering these severe bite wounds to his arm.
Just a nightmare scenario.
But the detail from the source material that I find absolutely fascinating and honestly terrifying is what actually saved his life.
Yeah, this part is incredible.
It wasn't bear spray. It wasn't a weapon. It was his seatbelt.
His seatbelt. That specific detail underscores the brutal mechanical physics of the encounter.
Yeah, it literally anchored him down.
It ceased to be a wildlife sighting and became a literal tug-of-war for survival.
He stated that the seatbelt physically anchored him to the seat while this massive animal was using all of its leverage to try and extract him from the vehicle.
The physics of that are mind-boggling. The bear pulling one way, the seatbelt holding him back.
And it bought him the few critical seconds he needed. Because other drivers on the pass realized what was happening and started laying on their horns, shouting, basically creating a wall of noise.
Which is exactly what you should do to scare a bear off.
Right, and it finally overwhelmed the bear and caused it to retreat.
The intervention of those bystanders was crucial. But the aftermath of this event is what the Romanian authorities are desperately trying to highlight.
Because it keeps happening, right?
Yes. Now, Bizev was treated by security guards at the dam and emergency services before returning to Bulgaria. But to his credit, his post-attack admission was remarkably self-aware.
Oh, I remember this quote.
Yeah. He stated, "I entered its environment. It was a mistake for which I paid."
Man, that is a heavy realization.
It is. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that statement perfectly encapsulates the danger of erasing ecological boundaries from the human side.
Because bears are protected in Romania, right?
They are a protected species. But when we feed them, we biologically rewire them. We teach them that asphalt roads equate to a caloric reward.
Which draws them right to us.
Exactly. It draws them out of the forest canopy and into our infrastructure, making these violent clashes an absolute statistical certainty.
It's just a matter of time. And, that dynamic makes total sense when a human actively lures a bear to a car. We invite the danger in.
We initiate it, yeah.
But the illusion of safety is shattered even more when we look at instances where we didn't invite them in at all.
Right, the second report.
Yeah, instances where the wild infiltrates spaces we consider to be literal fortresses of human industry.
This is where it gets really unsettling.
It really does. This brings us to the second major event in our sources, which occurred just days after the attack in the Carpathians, but thousands of miles away in northeastern Japan.
The contrast in the setting is what makes this so critical to analyze. We are shifting from a scenic mountain highway to the Fusichikino district in Fukushima.
Specifically, we're looking at the Fukushima Steelworks.
A completely different world.
Here's where it gets really interesting. A steelworks factory is arguably one of the most hostile, unnatural environments you could possibly imagine.
Oh, absolutely.
It is loud, it is intensely metallic, full of heavy machinery, harsh chemical smells, bright lights.
It's an assault on the senses, even for a human.
Right. Yet emergency calls started flooding in because a wild black bear had penetrated the compound.
Just walked right in.
Security cameras caught the animal chasing a worker in his 20s near the entrance, physically catching him and knocking him to the ground.
And the progression of the attack reveals an animal in a state of profound disorientation.
Yeah, because it didn't stop there.
Exactly. The bear didn't just strike near the entrance and flee back to the woods. It moved deeper into the industrial facility.
Into the maze.
Right. It attacks a second employee, a man in his 60s, entirely inside the steelworks.
Which is just terrifying to think about.
And then it exited that compound, navigated to a completely different nearby company to injure a third man.
And the chaos eventually spilled out into the surrounding residential streets.
Yes.
The Fukushima City Fire Department reported that an 80-year-old woman living nearby was also attacked and injured before first responders could finally intervene.
So we're talking about 4 victims across a wide age range spanning industrial and residential zones.
But, okay, here is where I'm struggling to understand the biology of this.
What's tripping you up?
If a bear's primary survival tactic is avoiding danger, which you said earlier, why doesn't it just run away from the noise?
It's a logical question.
Right. How does sensory overload turn into a multi-victim rampage instead of a panicked retreat back to the forest?
To understand that, we have to look at how a bear actually processes the world.
Okay.
A bear's primary sense is olfactory. Its sense of smell is exponentially more powerful than a bloodhound's.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was that strong.
Oh, yeah, it's incredible. And its secondary navigational tool is its acute hearing.
Okay. Smell and hearing.
So when a bear wanders into a steel mill, it is instantly hit with the smell of sulfur, ozone, and burning metal.
Which basically fries its nose.
Exactly. It effectively blinds its primary way of understanding its surroundings. Simultaneously, the deafening noise of the machinery destroys its spatial awareness.
So it can't smell its way out and can't hear its way out.
Right. The bear is suddenly functionally blind and deaf to its natural cues. It literally doesn't know which way is out.
So it isn't hunting these workers. It is trapped in a maze of sensory torture.
Precisely the opposite of a calculated hunt. The sensory overload triggers a catastrophic misfire of the fight or flight response.
Because it can't flee?
Exactly. Because it cannot orient itself to flee, every sudden movement, every human it encounters in that maze is perceived as an immediate life or death threat, blocking its escape.
Just obstacles in its way.
Right. And the indiscriminate nature of the attacks, striking a worker in his 20s, a man in his 60s, an 80-year-old woman, it shows an animal reacting with pure, blind, defensive aggression to an environment that is overwhelming its nervous system.
Wow. That completely reframes the entire Fukushima incident.
It does.
It is not some monster attacking a town. It's a wild animal whose internal navigation system has been completely scrambled by human infrastructure.
Exactly.
But, it forces us to ask the bigger question. Why was the bear in the industrial zone in the first place?
This raises an important question, yes.
Right, because in Romania, the humans brought the food to the bear's habitat. But what is driving the bears into the factories in Japan?
Well, authorities in both regions are pleading with the public to remain cautious, but honestly, they are fighting a symptom, not the disease.
What's the disease?
What we are witnessing is the inward collapse of ecosystems.
Going back to that phrase.
Right. The wilderness is becoming so compressed by human development, climate shifts, and food scarcity that the buffer zones, they just no longer exist.
The boundaries are gone.
Exactly. Industrial parks, residential neighborhoods, and highways are becoming the new, unavoidable transit corridors for displaced wildlife.
They don't have a choice.
No, the bears aren't invading our spaces. They are desperately trying to survive in a landscape where the wild has been fractured into isolated pockets.
Man, that is so bleak. We build a dam or a factory or a massive steel compound, and we just arrogantly assume that nature received the zoning laws and agreed to stay on its side of the line.
Like they respect our property lines.
Right. We treat our cars like mobile force fields and our factories like walled fortresses.
But they're not.
No. So what does this all mean? When we look at the synthesis of these two deeply unsettling reports, the core takeaway for you listening is that these protective bubbles are incredibly fragile illusions.
Absolutely. And, knowledge is only valuable when it changes how we interact with the world around us.
Very true.
Whether you are driving through a scenic overlook or just walking to work in an industrial park bordering a forest, you have to recognize that the separation between human and wild environments has fundamentally broken down.
It's a shared space now.
Nature is not a backdrop for a social media post, and it doesn't respect our concrete borders.
No, it doesn't.
When we project our human behaviors onto wild animals, like assuming a tossed snack makes us friends,
Right.
or assuming heavy machinery will somehow keep them away, we invite these tragic, violent consequences.
It really demands a complete recalibration of how we respect the sheer power of apex predators. The force fields are broken. But I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over today, something that builds on this idea of collapsing boundaries.
Okay, what is it?
We started by discussing the comfort of looking at nature through a car window. But if bears are now smashing through those windows because we've habituated them,
Right.
if they're chasing us through our own steel mills because their navigational systems are shattered by our expansion, at what point do we have to accept that we aren't just visiting nature anymore?
We are part of it.
We are actively on a collision course with the natural world. If our infrastructure continues to expand and our tourism reaches deeper into their remaining sanctuaries, what happens when there is simply no wild left for them to retreat to?
That's the million-dollar question.
If the boundaries were completely gone, how do we begin to share a world where every space is potentially a shared space? Think about that next time you take a drive.
Okay, one question for you. Did the tourist unknowingly trigger the mother bear's protective instincts by feeding her cubs? And could this terrifying attack have been completely avoided if wildlife safety rules were followed? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.